Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, entering the hall are the 2018 Dan David Prize laureates, accompanied by Professor Joseph Klafter, President of the Tel Aviv University and Chairman of the Dan David Prize Board, Mrs. Gabriela David, and Mr. Ariel David, son of the founder, the late Mr. Dan David. מכובדיי, גבירותיי ורבותיי, ערב טוב וברוכים הבאים לטקס הענקת פרס דן דוד לשנת 2018. על מנת לאפשר לאורחים הרבים שאינם דוברים עברית לעקוב אחר הטקס, הוא ינוהל ברשותכם כמובן בשפה האנגלית. Professor Nili Cohen, President of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, Mrs. Gabriela David, Mr. Ariel David, Professor and Mrs. Joseph Klafter, honored laureates and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Dan David Prize Award ceremony. This is the 17th ceremony we are celebrating tonight. The founder, Mr. Dan David, who conceptualized the unique character of the prize, is greatly missed. Let us remember Dan David, some of the landmarks of his life and his vision.
Se volete che comincio dall'inizio, andiamo indietro 80 anni, o quasi 80 anni, al 23 maggio del 1929, quando sono venuto alla luce a Bucarest, in una vecchia casa dove abitava la mia famiglia. A 2 anni non parlavo, finché un giorno, quando una vettura è entrata nel nostro cortile, ho detto auto. Non so se mi riferivo a quella vettura o al sogno delle macchine automatiche che doveva riempire la mia vita alcuni anni dopo. Anni della guerra, abbiamo sofferto a Bucarest, ma meno di quello che era successo in Polonia oppure nel nord della Romania. Però la vita è andata avanti. 1944, 24 agosto, Viene creata un'organizzazione della gioventù sionista. Divento molto attivo in questo campo, entro nella gruppi di giovani, vivevano insieme e si preparavano a partire in quello che allora era la Palestina e che doveva diventare Israele. Noi in quel momento eravamo in una città chiamata Piatra Neamz, dove avevamo organizzato quello che si potrebbe chiamare un piccolo kibbutz. E la vita era difficile. Sono andato all'Università delle Scienze Economiche e ho imparato tante cose che non mi sono mai state utili in tutto il resto della mia vita. Non passa molto tempo e mi prendono agli interrogatori. Vengono registrato, mi si levano le scarpe, la cintura, specialmente l'orologio, vengo portato in una cella, mi mettono sempre quei famosi occhiali neri che per me sono un simbolo di quello che è successo. Dopo 4 anni ho trasformato uno dei miei hobby in professione e sono diventato fotoreporter, reporter artistico, fotografo industriale. E nel 61 prendo la mia prima vacanza per andare nel mondo libero. Avevo visto a Parigi delle macchine per fototessera e mi ero interessato a chi le fabbrica. Le fabbrica la società Photo-Me in Inghilterra. Non avevo molti soldi, molti risparmi, arrivo a Hersham, dove era la sede della Photo-Me, e dico: buongiorno, vorrei avere l'esclusiva delle vostre macchine per Israele. Posso darvi un anticipo per una prima macchina e poi mi impegno durante il primo anno di comprarne altre 5. E così comincia la mia vita, il mio abbinamento con la fototessera automatica. La parola auto che aveva pronunciato all'età di 2 anni si riferiva probabilmente a questo. Firmo un contratto di esclusiva per 120 macchine da installare in Italia e arrivo a Roma la sera del 4 novembre 1962 e il 7 di novembre registriamo la società Dedem Automatica. Nel 68 ho avuto l'occasione di prendere una posizione più importante nella Photo-Me e mi sono occupato di aprire nuovi paesi. Ho cominciato con dare un forte impulso alla società statunitense. Verso la fine di 68 ho avuto forse la più grande sfida della mia attività, il Giappone. E poi, come in altri momenti della mia vita, ho incontrato una persona che veramente mi ha fatto uscire da questo difficile periodo della mia vita. Ho incontrato Gabriella, è arrivato Ariel e la vita è ricominciata. Il successo dimostra che sei arrivato su questa terra e hai realizzato qualche cosa. La tua ingegnosità, la tua creatività hanno lasciato qualche cosa dietro a te. E non solo per te stesso, per te solo, per tutti quelli che intorno a te hanno costruito una famiglia, un'attività, una vita forse più felice grazie a quello che tu hai fatto. Il mio successo è stato il successo di altre centinaia di persone, non solo mie.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was the vision of the founder of this foundation, the late Dan David. The main concept of the prize, as Dan always said, is time, the 3 dimensions of time. Our laureates represent the foremost achievements of humanity in understanding our past, building our present, and dreaming of our future.
gaze brought me down upon my knees. Oh, I beg and plead, singing, come out of things unsaid. Shoot an apple on my head and a trouble that can't be named. A tiger's waiting to be tamed, singing, stops. The closing walls and the ticking clock's gonna come back and take you home. I could not stop that you now know, singing, come out upon my seas, curse missed opportunities. Am I a part of the cure, or am I part of the disease, singing,
Thank you, Adi Ezra and the string quartet from the Buchmann Mehta School of Music, who performed the contemporary song The Clock by Coldplay. It is an honor to call upon Professor Joseph Klafter, President of the Tel Aviv University, to open the ceremony. Professor Klafter, please.
Gabriela David, Ariel David, Professor Nili Cohen, President of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, Professor Yaron Oz, Rector of Tel Aviv University, Vice Presidents of the University, Professor Itamar Rabinovich, Chair of the Dan David Foundation, Governors of Tel Aviv University, distinguished prize laureate, colleagues and students, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2018 Dan David Prize ceremony at Tel Aviv University. This year, we are marking the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel. Sadly, Dan David, the late founder of the prize, is not here with us to celebrate this festive occasion. But I'm sure if he were here, he would be so happy and proud. His entire life, Dan was a living, breathing exemplar of one of Tel Aviv University's core values, our emphasis on interdisciplinary studies. Dan was a polyglot and a polymath. He felt as comfortable discussing the sciences as he did the humanities. He was as intrigued by pioneering technologies as he was with powerful insights. His curiosity was boundless And not only did he glory in the interconnectedness of all intellectual effort, but he also believed in the interconnectedness of time dimensions, past, present, and future. The 2018 prize fields express this boundless interconnectedness in the historical, ethical, and medical fields. In the past category, in the field of history of science, Professors Lorraine Daston, Evelyn Fox Keller, and Simon Schaeffer have demonstrated that one cannot understand the evolution of science divorced from its political, economic, cultural, and even gender contexts. These interconnections deeply influence how scientific investigation is both performed and perceived. In the present category, in the field of bioethics, the three laureates, Professors Ezekiel Emanuel, Jonathan Glover, and Baroness Mary Warnock, have explored ethical issues involved in creating life, prolonging life, and ending life. Their seminal works draw on the life sciences, biotechnology, medicine, politics, law, philosophy, and describe the interrelationships between them. Finally, in the future category, in the field of personalized medicine, we honor tonight three cancer pioneers, Professors Carlo Croce, Bert Fogelstein, and Mary Claire King, who is also an honorary doctor of Tel Aviv University. Drawing on genetics, molecular biology, virology, immunology, and evolutionary medicine, their groundbreaking research has opened the door to individualize diagnosis, prevention, and therapy. In the three fields selected for this year, our 9 laureates have succeeded precisely because they broke disciplinary and chronological boundaries. I think that crossing mental boundaries and revealing unpredictable connections captures the essence of the Dan David Prize. Distinguished prize laureates, thank you for this great privilege to host you here at Tel Aviv University and to celebrate your remarkable accomplishments. I would like to thank the Dan David Foundation, the Dan David Prize Committee, the devoted prize staff, you, our audience, and of course, Gabriela David and Ariel David, who are so committed to the prize and to Tel Aviv University.
Thank you so much, Professor Klafter. I have the honor to call upon Professor Nili Cohen, President of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, to deliver her address. Professor Cohen, please.
Good evening, everybody. My dear and distinguished friends, dear laureates, dear President Yosef Klafter, my dear friends Gabi and Ariel David. It is a great honor and delight to be here at the Dan David ceremony. I've been accompanying this ceremony since its inception. It is a reason for a great pride. All Dan David laureates mark excellence in science, culture, and social commitment. I had the honor and pleasure of knowing Dan David. I was deeply impressed by his personality, his vision, intellectual curiosity, interest in culture, and commitment to Israel and to society in general. These all have been shared with by his wife, Gabi, and son Ariel. The personal traits of vision, curiosity, culture, commitment are all embedded in the prize itself and keep Dan David alive in our soul and memory. I'm standing on this stage as a law professor emerita at Tel Aviv University, my second home. I had the great honor of serving my university as its first, till now only, female rector about 20 years ago. I have been watching with pride the great achievements of my colleagues at the university during all these years. Yet, I was given the honor to speak with you now due to my current role as the 10th president of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities. I am the second female president, honored to succeed my dear friend, world-renowned scientist, Professor Ruth Arnon, present here. For me, and for the whole scientific world, Ruth Arnon is a role model. I came to personally know her since she became president of the Academy, and even more so when I had the pleasure and honor of succeeding her. Her success as president of the Academy paved my way. In fact, all her glorious career paved the way for Israeli women scientists, researchers, and academic leaders. So I want again, with your help, to salute her. The State of Israel is celebrating this year its 70th anniversary. Since its inception, Zionism attached to its political vision an aspiration for scientific excellence. Higher education institutions were established in Israel many years before the establishment of the state. The focus on science and culture does not only enable us to know more about ourselves, the world we live in, and our society, it also promotes the welfare of our society and the world at large. Investment in science has in fact yielded outstanding achievements. Israeli Nobel laureates, Turing awardees, Fields medalists, as well as our great researchers and scholars are the giants on whose shoulders we all stand. We are proud, but we should not rest on our laurels. We should do every effort to sow the seeds for future achievements to encourage scientists. Dan David Prize joins the list of prestigious scientific prizes, which I've just mentioned. It goes hand in hand with the main task of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, namely advancing science. Researchers and scientists are mainly motivated by curiosity, but the fact that their scientific discoveries might be publicly recognized and praised serves as an efficient incentive for human achievements. Therefore, we are all grateful to the Dan David family for its generous contribution. We have here 9 brilliant laureates this year. Let us salute them all. I'm impressed by the fact that this year we have 4 women laureates. Professor Evelyn Fox Keller and Baroness Mary Warnock, who have my deepest admiration for their fantastic scientific achievements and for furthering women in science. I know more closely the two other women laureates, Professor Lorraine Daston, who delivered in the year 2014 the prestigious Buber Lecture at the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities. Her brilliant talk on Before the Two Cultures, Big Science and Big Humanities in the 19th Century made an indelible impression on the audience and on its readers. And finally, Professor Mary Claire King, whom I have the pleasure of personally knowing. I cannot forget the brilliant lecture she gave at this university about the social role of genetics in the war against the abuse of human rights. Actually, it concerned identifying children who had been stolen from their families and adopted illegally under the military dictatorship in Argentina. It was a fantastic lecture. Achievements in science require, apart from talent and total commitment, also atmosphere of freedom, equality, dignity. We strive to enable every human being, every woman, anyone who comes from a deprived background to achieve, to remove the barriers of the past, to break the glass ceiling, and to develop careers along with satisfying private life. Dan David has shown us that past barriers could be removed by curiosity, persistence, courage, tolerance, and understanding. I would like to focus on the last two words, tolerance and understanding. You might note that the acronym of tolerance and understanding is TAU, namely Tel Aviv University. Indeed, we should all be bound by these values for the flourishing of ourselves and society. So, let me conclude by expressing my gratitude to Gabi, Ariel, our laureates, my colleagues, and you, my dear friends of Tel Aviv University. Let us all rejoice this glorious celebration of science. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor Cohen, for your inspiring address. I have the honor to call upon Mr. Ariel David, member of the Dan David Foundation and son of the late Dan David, to deliver his address for this evening, please.
Good evening, Professor Nili Cohen, President of the Israeli Academy of Sciences and Humanities, Professor Yosef Klafter, President of Tel Aviv University, Professor Yaron Oz, Rector, members of the board, ambassadors, distinguished laureates of the prize, honored guests and dear friends, good evening to all and welcome. My mom says I should breathe and speak slowly. So if this takes time, it's her fault. Hi, Mom. I first of all wish to thank, she's an actress, so she knows. I first of all wish to thank all those who work year-round to put together this touching and meaningful event, particularly Smadar Fisher, the director of the prize, and Professor Oli Cheshnovsky, the scientific advisor, and all the team of the prize office. And thank you. And I wish to thank Professor Itamar Rabinovich, chairman of the Dan David Foundation, and all the members of the board of the prize and the selection committees. They deserve applause too. It's a tough job. Now, if you have joined us at this ceremony in the last few years, you know that I like to spend these few minutes reminiscing a bit about my father, who passed away almost 7 years ago. And I usually like to connect some happy memories of him to the specific fields of each year's prize. So when I was thinking of what I would say tonight, I asked myself, well, what are you going to talk about? What memories do you have here? The heated conversations you had with your father about bioethics, for example? That sounds a bit strange, right? Even for my dad. But then I thought more carefully, and I realized that yes, we did have conversations about bioethics, although at the time I didn't label them as such. And while these are not the most pleasant of memories, those conversations were as telling of his character and spirit as were his passion for the sciences and the humanities, his cunning business sense, or his generous philanthropy. Those discussions reflected his love for life, his desire to live life at its fullest, without compromises, and to make a dignified and painless exit when such an existence was no longer possible. Those difficult conversations obviously took place as he was nearing the end of his life and his health was declining. And issues like end-of-life care, living wills, and even euthanasia were not abstract philosophical questions, but real potential courses of action. I remember Googling and printing off the internet for him a template of a living will and helping him fill it out, just because he was always terrible with computers, so I had to help him. But as we discussed the details and ticked off the various treatments that you could accept or refuse, I remember finding myself torn between rationally agreeing with his views and emotionally rejecting them, between wanting to respect his wishes while also trying to push him, in a way, into prolonging his own suffering just so I could gain a bit more time with him. In the end, nature took its course, and when doctors acted upon that document that we had filled out together on a Sunday afternoon, I didn't question it, and I never regretted it, because I knew it was what he wanted. And I do like to think that if even more difficult choices had been called for, I would not have hesitated, and I would have respected his wishes. Not only because he was so obstinate and a little bit pig-headed, so even at death's door he would never take no for an answer, I'm sure, but because this is what he deserved. And my mother, as well as his friends from his youth in Romania, some of whom are with us here tonight, and some of whom have sadly left us over the years, they all remember him exactly as he was and as he deserved to be remembered, insatiable and unstoppable in his desire to do, to create, to learn, and to live. And I think that almost everyone here, and indeed almost everyone on this planet, at some point has faced or will face these kind of questions, engage in similar conversations, and grapple with such dilemmas, either directly or indirectly. And I think that this shared human fate really drives home the relevance of this year's prizes. This is, of course, true for our laureates in the field of bioethics, for whom end-of-life decisions are only one of the complex issues that they deal with. But it is also true for our laureates in the future time dimension, who are pushing the boundaries of medicine and giving us better and individually tailored options to screen for and treat diseases which until recently left us only with very few and often dismal options. And it is also true for our laureates in the history of science, who not only interrogate the past to document the progress of human knowledge, but they question and unravel the inner mechanisms of what we call reason and science, of how we, flawed apes that we are, can gain some understanding of our universe and its workings. So, dear laureates, I congratulate you on your outstanding achievements, and I hope that we can all learn a bit more from you about your research tonight and during the conferences and symposia that will take place in the coming days. And of course, I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, when you will donate 10% of your prizes to scholarships for young researchers in your respective fields, reflecting the prize's commitment to fostering the next generation of outstanding scholars. My dear friends and guests, you're all invited to join us for this more informal scholarship ceremony tomorrow afternoon, and of course to join us at the symposiums that will take place in the next few days. I of course especially hope to continue seeing you at this ceremony for many years to come, in good health, celebrating the achievements of those who strive to improve or protect human life, extend the frontiers of our knowledge, and make this world a better place. As the old Chinese curse goes, we are certainly living in interesting times. And the fields that the board of the prize has selected for next year reflect this troubling turn. We live in times when the place of education and reason is being questioned. Science and its most basic conclusions are being challenged, from the effectiveness of vaccines to the dangers of climate change. Ignorance and inexperience are often elevated, while around the world, in different ways and to different degrees, the freedom of the press, free elections, and the very foundations of democracy are under attack. So amid such turbulence, the board of the prize has elected to focus next year on the following fields. For the past time dimension, we will look at macro history, at the large, long-term trends in history that may help us better understand the transformations of our own time. In the present, we will be selecting laureates in the field of defending democracy. The fact that 8 years ago we had a very similar category, but in the past time dimension, rather than in the present, says much about the urgency of the current historical moment. Just a few years ago, the spread of democracy seemed like a fait accompli, while now we find ourselves in the position of looking desperately for those personalities who, in politics, in the media, or in other fields, work to preserve a system that is under siege. And finally, for the future time dimension, we will be recognizing those who, despite mounting political resistance and obstacles, are engaged in combating climate change, which of course is a very real phenomenon and a true threat to our future. So I hope to see you all here again next year, because like today, in the next few minutes, I am sure that we will be able to introduce you to those amazing human beings who can help us look at these interesting times as less of a curse and with more confidence and optimism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. I just wonder why you chose those topics for next year, but I think it's quite obvious. Thank you so much. The selected field for the 2018 Pastime Dimension is History and Science. 4 highly significant landmarks were selected to represent the wide domain of the history of science.
Thucydides, writing about the epidemic that devastated Athens in 430 BCE, was the first to state that disease could spread from one infected person to another. The germ theory of disease was first proposed in the 16th century. It postulated that many diseases are caused by germs. This theory was, however, not accepted by the medical establishment that maintained that diseases like cholera or Black Death are caused by miasma, or bad air, created by rotting material. In the mid-19th century, the Viennese obstetrician Ignaz Semmelweis convinced doctors to wash their hands with chlorinated water after performing autopsies and before examining pregnant women. He argued that this would eliminate the germs that cause childbed fever. Indeed, this simple procedure reduced maternal mortality caused by this disease from about 20% to 2%. Semmelweis is rightly described as savior of mothers. The discoveries of Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch during the second half of the 19th century induced the medical establishment to accept the germ theory. This was achieved by their findings that microorganisms cause rabies, anthrax, cholera, and tuberculosis. Robert Koch provided convincing experimental support for the concept of infectious diseases. His 4 basic criteria for demonstrating that a disease is caused by a specific organism remain the basis of medical microbiology today. Pasteur and Paul Ehrlich were founders of the concept to combat disease-causing germs by chemical or biological agents that would not harm the infected patient. Whereas Pasteur discovered that molds are capable of killing certain bacteria, Ehrlich developed a chemical drug that kills syphilis-causing bacteria. The discovery of penicillin by Alexander Fleming in 1929 marked the beginning of the antibiotics era, which revolutionized the treatment of infectious disease. The drug became widely available in 1945 due to the work of Ernest Chain and Howard Florey.
For centuries, alchemists dreamed of transforming common materials into precious gold. Chemistry showed that such transformation could not occur by chemical reactions. But after 1898, there was a realization that certain chemical agents change their identity via radioactivity, in which an unstable atomic nucleus loses energy by emitting radiation made up of particles. Radioactivity was discovered by Henri Becquerel in 1896, when he realized that some materials darken in a photographic film even when it is totally dark. The French physicist and chemist Marie Curie conducted pioneering research on radioactivity. She was the only person to win Nobel Prizes in both physics and chemistry. The discovery of radioactivity enabled the development of nuclear power, and today is used routinely in radionuclear diagnosis, MRIs, and therapy.
Albert Einstein created a new concept of the relationship between time, space, and matter. Einstein changed our view of the world. Time and space are no longer fixed variables. Special relativity shows that at very high velocities, approaching the speed of light, time shrinks. General relativity teaches that very heavy objects bend space. Einstein showed that energy and mass are different forms of the same thing. Before Einstein, scientists believed energy allowed objects to move and interact, and that mass was always preserved. Types of energy could be transformed from one kind to another, but nothing could be created or destroyed. Einstein proposed that mass is a super-concentrated form of energy, and that mass and energy can turn into each other and back again. The understanding that light emission can force other atoms or molecules to emit light has led to the invention of the laser. The name Einstein today is synonymous with genius.
For millions of years, the blueprint for the development of living organisms was unknown. In 1865, Gregor Mendel, a scientist and Augustinian monk, described the laws of heredity based on his experimental results. In 1881, the German biochemist Albrecht Kassel identified the chemical composition of nucleic acids, the genetic substance of biological cells, and key to the formation of DNA. The study by Walter Sutton and Theodore Boveri, for the first time, presented the chromosome theory of inheritance, by which genetic material is passed down from parent to child within the chromosomes. The major breakthrough came in 1953 when James Watson and Francis Crick published the DNA structure based on experimental results obtained by Rosalind Franklin, who, unrecognized for her contributions, died in 1958. The discovery of the DNA structure facilitated the understanding of the molecular mechanism of heredity and unraveled how information coded in DNA is transcribed to RNA. The completion of the human genome sequence led to innovative discoveries that offer humanity the promise of a better future.
The Dan David Prize Board has accepted the recommendation of the International Review Committee, chaired by Professor Naomi Oreskes from the Department of History of Science, Harvard University, and selected Professor Lorraine Daston, Professor Evelyn Fox Keller, and Professor Simon Scheffer for the 2018 Dan David Prize for the Pastime Dimension in the field of history of science. They deserve it. Professor Lorraine Daston for her groundbreaking historical work on the ideals and practices of rationality, as she has termed the basic categories of scientific investigation and accomplishment, for showing that these categories of scientific rationality surprisingly change over time and place.
I'm interested in the preconditions for science that lasts over thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of years. The question is, what are the preconditions in terms of keeping data, having archives of data that make that kind of science possible, so that we can have a science of phenomena that dwarf a human lifespan of perhaps 75 years. How is that possible, given how short our lifetimes are, how short even most civilizations are? No one scholar can cover the history of a field as long-lived as astronomy from its origins in Mesopotamia 3,000, 4,000 years ago to the present. We form a working group. Given that the civilizations that create them will eventually decline and disappear, how is it that these records have been cherished, copied, transmitted over millennia and also over continents? What kinds of routes of cultural transmission are necessary in order to make that possible? So this is a mosaic where the pieces have to be put together by a team of scholars. Those who are involved have to have an almost utopian vision of their disciplinary future. This is why it is not an accident that there is so much utopian writing in connection with science and science fiction from the very beginning. Every scientist must ask herself or himself, what will endure from all that I have done? The archives will endure. The next step is to look broadly across several cultures and several epochs to try and get an idea of the possibilities of different knowledge systems with their different epistemic aspirations, and to learn something about what's really special about what we call modern science.
Professor Evelyn Fox Keller for her pioneering work on language, gender, and science that has transformed our views of the history of science, for extensively examining the role of language in the history of science, and especially in genetics and molecular biology, for her early insights that helped both to reveal many of the obstacles to pursue of science faced by women and to envision a gender-free science.
Science had a particular commitment to the notion that there was something special about what they were doing, a special kind of thinking, a special kind of philosophy, a special kind of activity that was, in the most general sense, was thinking like a man. There is no magic lens. We have learned that science gives us a mirror, a reflection of nature, so that the laws of nature are in nature. We've learned that that picture of science just doesn't work. that it really is not a very good description of actually what happens. That what happens is that the descriptions of nature, the theories of nature, are very complexly influenced by all kinds of social, cultural, psychological presuppositions. Language, I think, is the mediator of human values and human expectations into our descriptions of nature. And if we want to understand how science reflects, the ways in which science is reflecting back to us particular expectations, particular values, we have to understand, we have to look at the language of science and see how that works, how the traffic between ordinary and technical language works as a carrier of, if you will, of ideology into science. The language of sex and the language of gender have been extremely prominent in scientific discourse since the scientific revolution. The central metaphor for the scientific revolution was a marriage between mind and nature that was modeled on a particular kind of marriage, a patriarchal marriage, the purpose of which was the domination of the bride nature.
Professor Simon Scheffer, for the way his work has transformed our understanding of the intricate role of science in history, for his impressive body of work that demonstrates how experiment can no longer be seen as the mere testing of theories, and how crucial is public understanding and trust in realizing its potential in society.
I think the question of what is science is one of the most fascinating ones in modern society. A quick way of defining science might be something like, science is reliable, shared, technical knowledge about the world. But that's a very general definition. Much more interesting is how different the ways of understanding science are at the moment and have been through history. Defining science is often also a way of defining the activities of people who produce it. It's completely impossible to understand the past of the sciences without engaging with contemporary sciences. The problems historians ask are problems always suggested by our contemporary situation. The only danger is to forget that fact and to pretend that the past effortlessly produces its own questions. Not only that, but I always think that without an understanding of the concerns, questions, and interests of contemporary sciences, historians of science are in a certain sense disabled. All scientific practitioners always also produce histories. They all tell each other stories about how they got to where they are and where they want to go. They certainly all write their autobiographies. It's not a choice as to whether historians of science and scientists engage with each other. They do, and they have to. Without understanding how we got to where we are, we're very unlikely to make informed decisions. As a great social scientist once said, if you forget the past, you are condemned to repeat it. So one of the things that historians of science can offer the social world is a better, more reliable memory. Historians of science, I think, can and should take part in the most urgent debates. Without exaggerating, I think historians of science have a really central role to play in the current debates about economy and society.
I'm honored to invite to the stage Professor Joseph Klafter, President of the Tel Aviv University and Chairman of the Dan David Prize Board, and Mr. Ariel David, member of the Dan David Foundation, to present the awards. I'm honored to invite to the stage the recipient of the prize, Professor Lorraine Daston. I have the honor to invite to the stage the recipient of the prize, Professor Evelyn Fox Keller, please. I have the honor to invite to the stage the recipient of the prize, Professor Simon Scheffer. Professor Daston and Professor Keller, please join Professor Scheffer for a group photo, please. I would like to ask Professor Fox Keller to remain on stage and address the audience on behalf of the History of Science laureates. And I thank Professor Daston and Professor Scheffer, Professor Klafter and Mr. David for their role. Thank you so much.
First of all, I want to express my enormous gratitude for the honor the awarding of the Dan David Prize allows. Especially, and I think I can speak for both Simon and Rainey, I want to express the gratitude of all three of us. I am especially honored to be brought into the company of Simon and Rainey, who, from my point of view, are the leading lights of the history of science, without question. Rainey and Simon are no strangers to very prestigious awards. They've both been the recipients of the Sarton Medal, the most prestigious prize in the history of science per se. Simon was a recipient of the Erasmus Award, which he shared with Steve Chapin for their book on Leviathan and the air pump. Rainey is the recipient of too many awards to enumerate here. I also want to thank the Foundation for putting me in the company of the other laureates, of both this year and in the past. And the list of those laureates is really quite impressive and provides eloquent testimony to the breadth of the vision of the Dan David Foundation. It provides abundant testimony to the importance of the interdisciplinarity and innovation that the Foundation has been so committed to. And last of all, of course, I'm grateful for the magnitude of the prize, which is a bit overwhelming, so I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fox-Keller. The selected field for the 2018 Present Time Dimension is bioethics. Bioethics is the study of ethical implications of advancement in biological research, biotechnology and medicine, genome sequencing and genetic engineering, stem cell research and cloning, abortion and euthanasia, the distribution of limited medical resources and responsibility towards future generations. These are only a few of the concrete questions that bioethicists address. In his book, The Children's Act, author Ian McEwan deals with a highly sensitive dilemma faced by Judge Fiona May, whether or not to force a life-saving transfusion on a child contrary to his religious beliefs.
A hospital authority urgently requires the permission of the court to treat against his wishes a teenage boy, A, with procedures they deem medically appropriate, which in this case includes blood transfusions. The treating consultant has told this court that by tomorrow, A's situation will have become a matter of life and death.
It is leukemia, the recognized treatment for which generally has good outcomes, but two of the drugs conventionally administered cause anemia,
which needs to be countered by blood transfusion.
The prognosis is dire.
If the declining hemoglobin would not be reversed.
I have just returned from visiting A in hospital. That is extremely ill is plain to see. However, he was able to make his wishes known to me with great clarity. He and his parents, being Jehovah's Witnesses, oppose the application on the basis of their religious faith.
Mixing your own blood with the blood of an animal or another human being
is pollution, contamination. It's a rejection
of the Creator's wonderful gift.
The opposition to the application rests on three principal arguments.
One,
A is 3 months short of his 18th birthday, understands the consequences of his decision, and should be treated as worthy of recognition for his decisions as any adult.
2,
refusing medical treatment is a fundamental human right, and the court should therefore be reluctant to intervene.
And 3,
A's religious faith is genuine and should be respected.
From what she had gathered that evening, did she find A to have a complete grasp of the implications of having his and his parents' wishes granted?
I find that he has little concept of the ordeal that would face him, of the fear that would overwhelm him as his suffering and helplessness increased.
The weird thing, my lady, is that I didn't start writing my best poetry until I got ill.
In fact,
why do you think that is?
In fact, he has a romantic notion of what it is to suffer. However, I take the Children's Act to encompass well-being and interests. I'm also bound to take into account A's wishes. In accordance with the doctrines of his religion, A refuses the blood transfusion.
I intend to crush Satan by obeying God's commandments.
Do you think God would have you blind or stupid and on dialysis for the rest of your life?
If you don't believe in God, you shouldn't be talking about what does or doesn't please Him.
It is a fundamental right in adults to refuse medical treatment. To treat an adult against his will is to commit the criminal offense of assault. That A is prepared to die for his religious beliefs demonstrates how deep they are. That his parents are prepared to sacrifice a dearly loved child for the faith reveals the power of the creed to which Jehovah's Witnesses adhere.
God has told us it's wrong. We know it's wrong. We know it because God has instructed us. Blood is the essence.
It is precisely this power that gives me pause. I do not believe that A's mind, his opinions are entirely his own. It will not promote his welfare to suffer an agonizing, unnecessary death and so become a martyr to his faith. Assuming a good recovery, his welfare is better served by all of life and love that lie ahead of him.
This has been no easy matter to resolve. Religions,
moral systems
are like peaks in a dense mountain range seen from a great distance.
None is obviously higher,
more important,
truer than another.
What is to be judged?
I have given due weight to A's age, to the respect due to faith, and to the dignity of the individual embedded in the right to refuse treatment. In my judgment, his life is more precious than his dignity. Consequently, I overrule the wishes of A and his parents. Therefore, it will be lawful for the applicant hospital to pursue the medical treatments of A they regard necessary.
Many thanks to Tali Kark, Adi Meirovich, Ronen Babluki, and Shirley Gal from the Ruth Kanner Theatre Group. The Dan David Prize Board has accepted the recommendation of the International Review Committee, chaired by Professor John Harris from the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine in King's College London, and selected Professor Ezekiel Emanuel, Professor Jonathan Glover, and Baroness Mary Warnock for the 2018 Dan David Prize for the present time dimension in the field of bioethics. Professor Ezekiel Emanuel for his pioneering fundamental research of end-of-life care, for his leading role in research ethics, focusing on both conceptual analysis as well as discussing regulatory issues, for advancing the field of bioethics by combining his skills as a physician, policymaker, and scholar. His analysis of the physician-patient relationship is a landmark widely taught.
If you're going to be a leader, you have to be passionate about what you're doing. Bioethics, one of the things which I like about it is it tends to be somewhat theoretical. You deal with abstract values, but it's also practical. You have to know what's going on in the world. You have to know what the real life problems are. You have to know what are practical solutions that you can actually implement. I think one of the big struggles is try to get complicated issues clear, and to both clear in my mind and then clearly expressed and communicated to other people. So let's take this issue of how to allocate scarce resources like organs, or if we had a pandemic flu, vaccines. What are the values at stake? Well, one of the things I can tell you, a pretty definitive conclusion, is there's not a single value that is going to determine how you allocate these things. There are going to be multiple values. Well, one of the challenges is how do you then balance multiple values, and how do you articulate how you're balancing them and why other people should see it the same way? That is a very challenging thing. End of life is a very value-laden moment where people come to look at their life and its meaning and the quality of their life and their relationship with family members and with others. And so it is a profound privilege to help people reconcile at that moment and understand the meaning and value of their life. And I think that's, in the end, what gives people a real purpose in their life. If we had a lot more smart people in the field with a lot more sustained support, those issues could be well addressed.
Professor Jonathan Glover, for his seminal contributions to the theoretical aspects of bioethics, for setting the research agenda in many topics and in particular human enhancement and reproductive ethics, for his original research spanning diverse topics including human nature, war and the Holocaust, genetic ethics, neuroethics and psychiatric issues. The originality of his thought is marked by the role he plays in shaping the debates others will follow.
In quite a lot of literature about bioethics, the word dignity is used, and half of me thinks that that's a really good thing, because respect for human dignity is obviously a very important and desirable thing. On the other hand, the other half of me thinks that since nobody is actually against respecting human dignity, there's a danger of falling into platitude and waffle if one just says, I believe in respect for dignity. Medical ethics and philosophers need to get much more involved with better interpretation of people, their needs, values, and in general what they're like. Kant said something, talking about our knowledge of our understanding of the physical world, said that thinking without experience is empty and experience without thinking is blind. I think that's not a bad motto for medical ethics. I'd like that to be one thing at the back of people's minds, that you need both thinking and experience, and preferably philosophers and doctors need to become a little bit more like each other.
Baroness Mary Warnock, for her leading role in the development of practical bioethics and specifically for her progressive and unparalleled contribution to the ethics of embryology and genetics and their ethical and philosophical implications, and for her work on reproductive technologies and disability studies.
My name is Mary Warnock, and my work is in philosophy. The changes that there have been are really two. I mean, one is that people are much more open and talk much more than they did about infertility and fertility. They know much more than they did. But the second thing, of course, is that since 1978, there has been techniques, starting with in vitro fertilization, where people recognize that they can be helped to have a baby if they don't conceive naturally. I don't think there can be any question of rights in this area, because you can't have a right to something which it's impossible that you can get. And for some people, it's never going to be possible to have their own biological baby. I mean, they may be born without a womb. Well, the one thing that the law needs is certainty. 14 wasn't a number of days just plucked out of the air. It did actually correspond more or less to the normal development of the embryo, where a great number of changes start and develop very quickly after day about 15. Before that moment of this primitive streak, the embryo couldn't have any experiences at all, because they don't even have the vestige of a central nervous system. So 14 days could be justified. It's not a particularly accurate number, but it's a precise number, and that is the precision that the law needs. My greatest fear for the future is not really a fear, it's just a rather gloomy prediction. that actually the human race will die out eventually. And that just makes me sad. It doesn't fill me with alarm and panic. I think we shall, in 100 years' time, of necessity, change our attitude to death. We've already changed our attitude to birth, and I think death will come next. And I believe that in 100 years, attitudes will have changed.
I'm honored to call upon Mrs. Gabriela David and Professor Itamar Rabinovich, chairman of the Dan David Foundation, to present these awards. I have the honor to invite Professor Ezekiel Emanuel to receive his prize. I have the honor to invite Professor Jonathan Glover to receive his prize. I'm honored to invite Baroness Mary Warnock to receive her prize, please. Professor Emanuel and Professor Glover, please join Baroness Warnock for a group photo. I'd like to ask Professor Glover to remain on stage and deliver his address on behalf of the bioethics laureates. And I thank very much Baroness Warnock and Professor Emanuel, Mrs. David, and Professor Rabinovich. Thank you so much.
The Dan David Prize is a great honor. Thanks to the committee for giving it to the three of us. I know that Mary, Zeke, and I really appreciate this great honor. I should also say that seeing the bit of film about Dan David made me feel even more delighted to be associated with this prize and indirectly with him. I felt I was watching a man who no one could possibly dislike. And with another prize in mind, I should say that my wife whispered to me, photograph machines are rather better than dynamite. In choosing this year's subjects, of course, you didn't just honor us by choosing us to be the laureates, you also honored bioethics. I should say that bioethics is actually a slightly ramshackle subject. We're a rather mixed group. A few of us are just bioethicists, but many of us are scientists, doctors, theologians, lawyers, and philosophers. You might say a nest of singing birds, except that there are some topics, for instance, abortion, various end-of-life issues, we might say it's more like a nest of angry birds. Much bioethics is about regulation to prevent harm. It's about discussing what should be the content of codes of medical ethics, laws about abortion, and so on. But some of it is more open-ended discussion about aimed at the future, planning how to handle possible future scientific developments before they arrive. I mean, I think more or less anyone in the either the second half of the 20th century or the first years of our century can't totally escape the memory of how nuclear weapons arrived before we'd thought about what should be done with them or how they should be contained or controlled. And we've been trying to run and catch up ever since. And so part of the movement in bioethics is to think in advance about things that may or may not happen, but it's a good idea to work out what would be the human, decent way of dealing with something which may arise. I want to just mention, before concluding, a couple of things that I believe seem some way away, but which we really ought to be thinking about now. One is the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility that neuroscience will develop in such a way that we can start to read people's inner mental lives from their brain activity. One of the scientists who works on this kind of project has talked about reading the movies in people's minds. And at the moment, of course, this is a very long way off, but some of the work is, I think, fascinating, but at the same time slightly alarming, no more than slightly alarming. Sometimes they've shown films to people, then read off what's going on in their brains, and then put this through various computing activities and so on, and found that they can get an idea of what sort of film is going on in their minds. And this, I think, is a bit alarming. Now, at the moment, the pictures are extremely indistinct. They're like very early television. But remember what happened with that. And I think that George Orwell, I mean, one of the values mentioned in the Dan David Prize and the university here, one of the values mentioned was freedom. And of course, one of the great 20th century defenders and exponents of human freedom was George Orwell. And in his book 1984, where they could snoop on everything, they had surveillance everywhere, they had cameras everywhere, one of the things which he says at one point is that the few inches in our skull were the only private space left. And I think we need to think very carefully about whether we want to maintain those few inches in our skull from other people's observation. There are huge difficulties in, I mean, if it does go ahead, it's always so hard to know how to damp down research in any area, how to control it, and so on. But these are issues which I think we really ought to be thinking about. Now, the second one I want to mention is the way in which artificial intelligence seems to give the possibility of transcending the human biological limits. Ray Kurzweil's well-known phrase, the singularity, the moment when our biological brains may be surpassed and possibly ultimately replaced by non-biological intelligence coming from computers and artificial intelligence. In one way, this offers, again, like many of these developments, there are huge promises. If we could build machines that could exceed our intelligence, they could do wonderful things for us. And it's much discussed that, of course, the worry would be how do we control them if they're so much smarter than us? And nobody, I think, really has a thoroughly satisfactory way of responding to that question. But I want to just mention another question which seems to me just as deep, if less immediately threatening, which is if we get to the point where machines can function so much better than us, artificial brains can function so much better, natural brains may simply be replaced by those brains. And I think the deep worrying question about that, apart from what they might do, is would we know that they're conscious? Could we know that they're conscious for certain? Because at present, we conscious thinking human beings who've started to understand the universe through our scientific development, we are in a way part of the process by which the universe becomes conscious of itself. And although people talk about alien life in other places, we don't yet know that it exists. And so my worry is that this wonderful adventure of consciousness, of subjective awareness of what the world is like, could come to an end if we allow ourselves to be replaced by machines that don't have subjective experiences. I mentioned these problems. I have little idea what the answers are, but I hope that bioethics will remain lively in the future and will look at some of these slightly terrifying advances in science that may be upon us. Thank you.
The selected field for the 2018 Future Time Dimension is personalized medicine. Personalized medicine separates patients into different groups with respect to her or his predicted risks of diseases and response to therapy. Therapy is tailored to individual patients based on their genetic profile, which is determined by DNA or RNA sequencing. The discoveries of our 3 laureates in cancer genetics enable the assessment of the genetic risks of the individual patient to develop the disease and to identify those patients likely to benefit from a given therapy. The specific link between people and the individualized treatment will be illustrated by the Vertigo dance group. This was the Vertigo Dance Group. The Dan David Prize Board has accepted the recommendation of the International Review Committee, chaired by Professor Peter Vogt of the Department of Molecular Medicine at the Scripps Research Institute, and selected Professor Carlo Croce, Professor Mary Claire King, and Professor Bert Vogelstein for the 2018 Dan David Prize for the Future Time Dimension in the field of personalized medicine. Professor Carlo Croce for making groundbreaking discoveries on the molecular basis of lymphomas and leukemias, for identifying major drivers of cancer development, and for providing a pioneering insight as to the role of microRNAs in cancer pathogenesis.
One of the main targets today of CLL is this gene that I discovered in 1984, okay? And I named BCL2. Then the Australian groups of Adams and Corey found that this gene behaved differently from all the other genes that were known at that time because it doesn't affect proliferation, but it affects survival. If the gene is overexpressed, the cell lives longer. So I think that was probably one of the most fascinating discoveries of the 80s and 90s in cancer research. I was fascinated by the fact that in CLL there is a genetic alteration which is very common, and that is the deletion of chromosome 13. And so I wanted to find a gene on chromosome 13 that might be lost and could cause CLL. So the next step was to try to find the target. The problem at that time was there were no drug, no small molecule drug, that could inhibit protein-protein interaction. Finally, Abbott, they came up with a specific inhibitor of BCL2, and that inhibitor, I must say, is dynamite in the treatment of CLL. Now we close the circle. We went from discovery to the discovery of the genetic mechanism that are involved in the pathogenesis of the disease, and the pharmaceutical company was able to make a drug that killed that target. And that, I think, will save thousands and thousands of patients. But in addition, will save patients not only with CLL, but also with some other diseases, because BCL2 is overexpressed in fraction of many other tumors. And that gives the opportunity to treat other malignancies in which BCL2 contribute to pathogenesis, and they could be treated with venetoclax. So it opens a phenomenal opportunity for successful treatment and possibly cure.
Professor Marie-Claire King for her seminal finding that inherited predisposition to breast and ovarian cancer results from mutations in a single gene named BRCA1. This game-changing discovery revolutionized screening for inherited cancer risk and paved the way to individualizing interventions and therapy.
Genetics has changed remarkably, radically, fundamentally, completely in the time I've been in the field. We are so incredibly lucky to be doing genetics now. It's a magical time. It's the stuff that dreams are made of. I can't imagine doing anything that's more fun. Almost every family has its own mutation. Almost every patient has a different mutation. If we can sort out how the genes that harbor these mutations are related to each other, we can, I hope, direct patients to medications that are particularly useful for them, because medications, of course, that are developed for this disorder attack different pathways and approach the regulation of different pathways differently. After the success of mitochondrial sequencing, and we developed this, I mean, nobody was using this yet, this was new to forensics. So we developed it, put it into application in Argentina. I mean, any risk to me was so trivial compared to what my colleagues, the abuelas, were going through. We're certainly best known for the breast cancer work. I've been at it the longest. I think what the transcendent theme is just thinking about genetics, is thinking in terms of the power of genetics throughout. But certainly the breast cancer work has saved more people than any of the other projects individually. These are unquestionably devastating mutations. We are not talking about possible effects, hypothetically, that might make a difference. These are, for sure, experimentally demonstrated damaging mutations. And people have a right to know if they carry those or not. I hope to be able to do genetics as long as my mind holds out.
Professor Bert Vogelstein for his seminal contributions to the understanding of cancer genetics and genomics, for the discovery of important oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, and for illuminating the genetics and epigenetics mechanisms leading to colon cancer.
If you have no idea what causes the disease, how can you even conceive, imagine doing something about it? This would be a valuable thing to spend one's life on, trying to find out what's going on and hoping that that information could eventually allow someone to look right in the eye of a parent and say, this is what caused your little girl's disease, and in the distant future, we know what caused it and we know how to get rid of it. Pancreatic cancer is probably the most deadly internal cancer. One of the reasons for its horrible prognosis is that it's often, in fact usually, not detected until very late. The research in our lab that the Lustgarten Foundation funds is precisely to change that situation, to develop an early test for pancreatic cancer. What I've seen after 30 years of research is that we now understand the disease at the molecular level, at the genetic level, in an unprecedented way. We now know enough about pancreatic cancer to think about overcoming it, because the history of medicine is that once one understands the disease, it's only a matter of time before that disease is conquered. I have a lot more than hope. I'm absolutely confident there will be progress.
It is an honor to call upon Professor Yaron Oz, Rector, Tel Aviv University, and Professor Peter Vogt to present the awards. I have the honor to invite to the stage the recipient of the prize, Professor Carlo Croce. I have the honor to invite to the stage the recipient of the prize, Professor Marie-Claire King. I am honored to call upon the recipient of the prize, Professor Bert Vogelstein. Professor Croce and Professor King, please join Professor Vogelstein for a group photo. I'd like to ask Professor King to remain on stage to address the audience on behalf of the Future Time Dimension laureates and thank very much to Professor Croce, Professor Vogelstein, Professor Oz, and Professor Vogt.
Thank you very much. Carlo and Bert and I would like to begin by congratulating the dancers for an absolutely stupendous performance. I'd very much like to know who the choreographer is, and perhaps sometime to have the choreographer interviewed so that we can read what her or his thoughts were in deriving such a beautiful piece of work. I'm also delighted that this whole ceremony is being filmed so that we can watch it again. I'm almost speechless by being here, but not quite. The Dan David Prize, as indeed the dance illustrated, celebrates the universality of human achievement and of human creativity. From our point of view as scientists, we believe that it celebrates the internationalism of science, that scientists are citizens of the world, and that it's absolutely consistent to be loyal to the world of science, to be loyal to scientific evidence, and at the same time to be loyal to one's homeland, that there is no inconsistency across those themes of one's life at all. Because the prize is so international, it can be tempting at such a moment to think of science as an international activity only. But Bert and Carlo and I would like to particularly call out those Israeli scientists who have been critical to our success as scientists. Carlo would like to, in particular, recognize the work of Eli Kanani from the Weizmann Institute. Eli and Carlo worked together on the identification of genes responsible for MLL and the characterization of that gene family. Carlo would also like to call out the work of Rami Akilan from Hebrew University. Carlo and Rami worked together on microRNAs in cancer development and in their role in epigenetic regulation, work that is still ongoing in Rami's lab. Bert would like to call out the work of Nadir Aber from Tel Aviv University. Nadir and Bert worked together on the characterization of DNA methylation in clinical samples obtained directly from patients in the course of their treatment. Bert would also like to recognize the work of Yardaner Samuels, now at the Weizmann Institute. Yardaner was a postdoc with Bert, and together they worked on the role of the oncogene, the PIK3CA kinase, in cancer. I am particularly honored to be able to recognize Yardaner because it was my honor to review her work during the cancer review at the Weizmann several months ago, and she's fabulous. And for my part, I would like to recognize two of my dearest friends in the world. One is Efrat Levi-Lahad from Shaare Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem. Efrat and I have been working together with our friend Maureen Canaan from Bethlehem University on the importance of understanding the genetic predisposition to breast and ovarian cancer among all women in the region, and in making that information available to women, and as well on congenital abnormalities that occur particularly in families in consanguineous communities. And finally, I would like to recognize my dear friend Karen Avraham from here at Tel Aviv University. Karen and Efrat brought me to Israel for the first time in the mid-1990s, and as my many friends here know, I have been coming ever since and have fallen in love with your country. I'd like to end, therefore, by wishing the country happy birthday, happy 70th birthday. One of my very few words of Hebrew is naches. One of the most remarkable features both of the language and of the country is the enormous pride that you have in your children. But I believe that your children also should have a reciprocal pride in you for all the challenges that the country clearly faces. It is remarkable, it is a miracle what has happened in this country in 70 years. In the field of science, we are in awe of what you have accomplished and what you continue to have accomplished. So for whatever the word is, for pride of children in the accomplishments of their parents, they should have it. And we thank you very much.
Many, many thanks, Professor King. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 2018 Dan David Prize Awards ceremony. The performer Yael Hun will come forward and will lead us to Hatikva, the national anthem, The Hope. Yael, please. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We invite you for additional events with our laureates, the Scholarship Award ceremony, 2 symposia on history of science, a symposium on bioethics, and a symposium on personalized medicine, not tonight, in the days that are coming. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Please join us also for refreshments in the entrance lobby. Good evening, good night, and drive safely.